By the end of the 1940s, the entire world agreed on one absolute rule of aviation. The era of the propeller was dead. The jet engine had arrived. In the West, military engineers were drawing up plans for sleek, high-altitude jet bombers like the B-52 Stratofortress. Propellers were relegated to slow civilian airliners and cargo planes. Everyone knew that if you wanted to carry heavy nuclear weapons across the globe at high speeds, you needed jet engines. But deep inside the secretive design bureaus of the Soviet Union, Andrei Tupolev looked at the jet engine, looked at the brutal distances required to strike the United States, and decided the rest of the world was wrong. He didn't build a jet. He built a propeller plane. But this wasn't a standard propeller plane. It was an aerodynamic monstrosity that broke the laws of physics, shattered the eardrums of anyone who heard it, and carried a live nuclear reactor just to see what would happen. This is the story of the Tupolev Tu-95 Bear, the 60,000 horsepower system error of the Cold War. To understand why the Tu-95 was so terrifying, you have to understand the hard limits of physics. Aerodynamic specialists in the 1950s believed that a propeller-driven aircraft could not exceed 500 miles per hour. The math was simple. As the plane flies faster, the tips of the spinning propeller blades break the sound barrier. This creates massive shock waves, violent vibrations, and an aerodynamic brick wall of drag. Tupolev's team, led by Nikolai Bazenkov, needed a bomber that could fly at 560 miles per hour, carry 15 tons of nuclear bombs, and stay in the air for 20 hours. Jet engines of the era burned fuel too quickly to achieve that range. So, Tupolev engineered a brute force cheat code. First, he designed a massive wing spanning 167 feet, swept backward at a sharp 35-degree angle, a feature usually reserved exclusively for supersonic jet fighters. Second, he turned to engine designer Nikolai Kuznetsov, who delivered the NK-12 turboprop. The NK-12 was a mechanical leviathan. It produced a staggering 15,000 shaft horsepower. The Tu-95 had 4 of them. That is 60,000 horsepower bolted to a single airframe. To convert that apocalyptic amount of energy into thrust without destroying the plane, they used massive 18-foot counter-rotating propellers. 2 sets of blades on each engine, spinning in opposite directions. When the Tu-95 throttled up, the tips of those gigantic blades spun faster than the speed of sound. The resulting noise was so catastrophic, so unearthly, that American submarine crews completely submerged in the ocean could hear the Tu-95 flying thousands of feet above the water. When the prototype flew in late 1952, it exceeded 560 miles per hour. Western intelligence was stunned. The Soviets had built a propeller plane that could run down early jet fighters. But raw performance always comes with a human cost. The Tu-95 was designed for extreme endurance. Cruising at 466 miles per hour, a standard nuclear patrol could last up to 20 straight hours. The cabin was pressurized to keep the crew alive in the freezing, thin air of the upper atmosphere. But inside that pressurized tube, the deafening, bone-rattling vibration of those supersonic propellers subjected the human body to immense psychological and physical torture. And if something went wrong? The Tu-95 held a dark, fatal flaw. By the 1950s, ejection seats were standard equipment in almost all high-performance military aircraft. The Tu-95 didn't have them. If the plane caught fire, the crew in the forward section had to rely on an emergency lift mechanism. They had to manually scramble out of their seats, get onto a lift, and be dropped through a trapdoor near the nose wheel. Imagine the sheer terror of this bailout procedure. You are falling out of the bottom of a 60,000 horsepower machine, traveling at over 500 miles per hour. Directly behind you are 4 massive 18-foot meat grinders slicing through the air. If you exited incorrectly, or if the plane was pitching downward, the slipstream would carry you directly into the propellers. In late 1953, this exact nightmare became reality. During a test flight, one of the massive engines caught fire and physically detached from the wing. The commander, Alexei Pereliot, desperately tried to keep the doomed Leviathan level so his crew could escape. 9 men managed to jump through the trapdoors and survive. Pereliot and 2 other engineers were trapped and died in the crash. Despite the danger, the Soviet Air Force pushed the Bear into serial production. By 1957, the Tu-95 was entering active service, and it was armed to the teeth. It wasn't just a bomber, it was a flying battleship. The Soviets recognized that this massive aircraft would be targeted by Western interceptors, so they covered it in guns. It carried 6 pairs of AIM-23 cannons, 1 pair in the nose, 2 on the top, 2 under the belly, and a remote-controlled tail turret. The gunners sat in pressurized, glass-blistered compartments, ready to unleash a wall of lead at any American jet that got too close. In its belly, it could carry 2 massive nuclear warheads. It became the ultimate symbol of Soviet reach. The Bear could take off from frozen runways in Siberia, fly to the coast of the United States, loiter for hours, and return home without ever needing to refuel. But the most insane outlier of the entire Tu-95 program wasn't its speed, its noise, or its weapons. It was a deeply classified offshoot called the Tu-95 LAL. During the height of the Cold War, both the US and the Soviets were obsessed with the idea of a nuclear-powered bomber, a plane that could literally stay in the air for months at a time without ever landing. The Soviets took a Tu-95 and physically bolted a live VVR-100 nuclear reactor into the bomb bay. The engines were still powered by standard aviation fuel. The reactor was there purely as a morbid, psychological, and ecological test. They wanted to see if they could shield the crew from the lethal gamma radiation emitted by an active nuclear core in flight. The Tu-95 LAL made 42 flights. During many of these flights, the reactor was fully active, bathing the surrounding airspace in radiation. Ultimately, the radiation shielding proved too heavy, and the ecological danger of a nuclear reactor crashing into the Earth was too high even for the Soviets. The project was scrapped. But the fact that human beings strapped themselves into a vibrating propeller plane with an unshielded nuclear reactor just feet behind their heads remains one of the most terrifying footnotes of the 20th century. The Tu-95 Bear was supposed to be a temporary solution, a stopgap measure until the Soviets could perfect their long-range jet bombers. Instead, it became an immortal relic. Production continued until 1959, and it spawned dozens of variants, from maritime reconnaissance to the Tu-142 anti-submarine hunter. While the sleek, futuristic jets of the 1950s have long been retired to museums and scrapyards, the Tu-95 is still flying today. It stands as a testament to the brutal, unforgiving logic of Soviet engineering. When faced with an aerodynamic wall, they didn't finesse their way around it. They strapped 60,000 horsepower to a swept wing, deafened the ocean, and simply smashed through the wall with sheer mechanical violence. The Tupolev Tu-95 isn't just an airplane, it is the ultimate defiance of convention, a propeller-driven ghost that refuses to die.